Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here today taking a deep look at some really challenging source materials, biographies, key texts, critical analyses.
That's right. And our goal is always to pull out the essential knowledge you need.
And today we have to confront a figure who is, well, unavoidable in modern history, Adolf Hitler.
Indeed. And our mission today, especially thinking about you, our listeners who are history learners or maybe studying philosophy, is to try and go beyond just the known facts of the destruction.
We want to analyze the mechanism of his rise.
Exactly. We're tracing the ideology that consuming Weltanschauung he developed. How did it take personal feelings, resentments, national trauma, and turn them into this coherent, revolutionary, and ultimately totalitarian doctrine?
We'll be looking closely at how his own writings, especially Mein Kampf, intersect with, well, the verifiable historical context that let those ideas actually take hold. So the big question, maybe the philosophical one underpinning this deep dive, is really, how could the documented failures, the resentments of this one young, pretty unknown man transform into a whole political vision, a vision that reshaped the world and let him grab absolute power?
That's the path we need to trace, from obscurity right up to becoming the Führer. And we'll use the documents we have as our guideposts.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. That relationship with his father, Alois, the sources paint it as really central, don't they?
Oh, absolutely central.
Yeah.
And deeply conflicted. Alois was, a customs official. He'd made a career, represented that imperial Austrian bureaucracy, and he was dead set on Adolf following that same path. Civil service, stability.
But Hitler hated that idea. Our sources make that very clear. It wasn't just like typical teenage rebellion.
No, it was more fundamental, an early kind of ideological resistance maybe against that specific kind of authority, that predictability. And his reaction, it's quite telling.
He deliberately failed at school.
Intentionally performed poorly in the real Schule, the technical school. The sources suggest this wasn't inability, but a tactic, a conscious effort to basically force his father's hand to make him give permission for the art dream, the dream of being a painter.
It's ironic, isn't it, that early act of rebellion against authority figures?
It really is, and it shows this kind of inflexible will early on, a will pitted against established mundane authority, and it apparently came at a cost.
Physical violence.
Yes. His sister Paula recalled beatings from Alois, but she also described Hitler developing this chilling stoicism, forcing himself not to react, not to cry out.
Like forging that image of an unbreakable determination he'd later project.
Exactly, that sense of self defined by will, resisting attempts to break it. That becomes a recurring theme, doesn't it, right through his political life.
Things shifted, though, after his parents died. Alois died first in 1903.
Which freed the teenager from his main antagonist, in a way. But the death of his mother, Clara, in December 1907, that was the real emotional blow. Breast cancer. Hitler was 18.
And the sources say he genuinely loved her.
Deeply, it seems. Contemporaries describe real affection. He apparently kept her photograph with him for the rest of his life.
Which leads to that very strange story surrounding her illness. The doctor.
Dr. Edward Bloch, yes.
Yeah.
A Jewish physician in Linz who treated Clara. And young Hitler was profoundly grateful. Promised him, eternal gratitude.
And decades later, when the Nuremberg laws were in full force, Hitler actually protected him.
He did. Ensured Bloch and his family could emigrate safely to the U.S. It's a stark anomaly.
The sources mention he called him Edler Jude, noble Jew, an expression he used for literally no one else. How do you even square that? Especially for, say, a philosophy student looking at this. Intense personal gratitude versus, well, genocidal hatred.
It's a profound question. It suggests a kind of psychological partitioning, perhaps. Bloch, the individual, fulfilled a personal debt, so he was exempted.
But the idea of the Jew.
Exactly. The abstract category, the international corrosive enemy that he was absorbing from Vienna's politics, that remained the necessary ideological target. Personal morality gets overridden by the radical dogma. It's a key mechanism, I think, in totalitarian thinking, that separation.
Okay, so his mother dies. He's grateful to Dr. Bloch, but then comes Vienna and failure.
Yes, the infamous Vienna period. He moves there after Clara's death, full of artistic ambition, only to be rejected, not once, but twice, by the Academy of Fine Arts, 1907, 1908.
And he saw that as a deep trauma.
Apparently so. A profound humiliation, something he couldn't really speak about honestly later on. It shattered that artistic dream.
And financially, it was disastrous.
Completely. By 1909, the orphan benefits were running out. He ends up in homeless shelters, men's dormitories. selling these, cheap watercolors just to get by.
That kind of downward spiral, it must have made him receptive to radical ideas.
It sees the perfect psychological ground, doesn't it, for adopting a radical Weltanschauung?
Let's unpack that term a bit. Weltanschauung.
Yeah.
It's more than just worldview, isn't it?
Oh, much more, especially in this context of German political philosophy. For Hitler, it became this total all-encompassing system, explaining everything. Life, history, morality, culture, economics, the whole lot.
Like a complete ideological framework.
Yes, the sources sometimes describe it as adopting a kind of totalitarian dogmatic faith, almost like a replacement for a comprehensive religion like Christianity or Islam in its all-encompassing nature.
Why did he need such a total system, this young man who was basically failing?
Well, arguably, it provided an external structure to make sense of his internal chaos and failure.
Yeah.
His personal humiliation wasn't his fault anymore.
It was because of some vast external conspiracy.
Precisely. He develops this intense pan-German nationalism. He despises the Habsburg Empire, multi-ethnic, pluralistic. He saw it as decadent. And Vienna's political atmosphere was thick with these ideas.
People like Karl Lueger, the mayor.
Exactly. Lueger's successful anti-Semitic politics were a huge influence. He managed to fuse anxieties about Jewish financial power with fears of Bolshevism and cultural decline. This created a single external enemy, a scapegoat for everything. Personal failure, national problems. It all got blamed on this one group.
In that simmering resentment, that developing worldview, it found an outlet in World War I, August 1914.
It really did. Despite being Austrian, he volunteered for the Bavarian army in Munich. For someone who felt aimless, the war was like a sudden calling, a unifying cause.
He served as a dispatch runner on the Western Front.
Yes, a dangerous job. Exposed him to constant fire. And he was decorated for his service. Iron Cross, second class, and later the first class.
And wasn't there another irony there with the first class decoration?
The recommendation came from Lieutenant Hugo Gutmann, who was Jewish. It just reinforces that strange split, doesn't it, between his personal interactions sometimes and the absolute categorical hatred of his ideology.
But the war ended traumatically for him.
Very much so. October 1918, temporarily blinded by mustard gas. And while he's recovering in hospital in Passwalk, he gets the news of Germany's surrender. The armistice, November 1918. He claimed the shock actually made him blind again, temporarily.
And for him, this wasn't a military loss.
No, absolutely not. The German army hadn't been crushed in the field, not in his view or that of many others. So it had to be a betrayal, political, civilian.
The Dolchstoß legend, the stab in the back myth.
He embraced it violently, this idea that the undefeated army was sabotaged. By who? Traitorous politicians back home, socialists, Marxists, and most venomously Jews.
So that myth became the lens through which he saw everything. His suffering, the national defeat, Versailles.
It channeled it all, focused it into this single burning political objective, reverse the humiliation, avenge the betrayal. That's when he resolved definitively to go into politics.
Okay, so he enters politics. He needs a language and ideological vocabulary that works. Let's break down a couple of key terms he politicized heavily. First, Reich.
Right. Reich literally means realm or empire. Historically, it could mean the Holy Roman Empire or Bismarck's German Empire from 1871, the Second Reich. Hitler used it, well, fluidly, to talk about the past, but mostly the future he wanted. The Third Reich.
Why Third Reich? What's the significance of that?
Well, for an audience thinking about history and philosophy, calling it the Third Reich was a really powerful move. It was like political metaphysics. It aimed to skip over, to erase the Weimar Republic, that democratic period he despised.
Linking his state directly back to the medieval empire and Bismarck's.
Exactly. Suggesting historical destiny, inevitability. It tapped right into that romantic German nationalist tradition. It wasn't just a name. It was a rejection of democracy itself.
Okay. Then there's Volk. Translates as people. But his meaning was much narrower, wasn't it?
Far more exclusive. For the Nazis, Volk wasn't just about citizenship. It was deeply racial, cultural. Tied to that 19th century Volkish movement, Hitler defined it as the whole body of the people without any distinction of class or caste.
So this idea of a unified Volkischer Staat, a people's state based on this Volkish equality.
Yes, but it's a clever rhetorical trick, isn't it? He's using the language of equality, no distinction of class, to actually eliminate the Marxist idea of class struggle based on economics.
And replace it with a national racial hierarchy instead.
Precisely. Nationalism completely trumps class. Your identity is blood, not economic status.
And that racial hierarchy was clear from the start, that 1919 Gemlich letter.
One of his earliest political writings we have. And it's explicit. He states the government's goal must unshakably be the removal of the Jews altogether. Right there. Genocidal language at the very beginning. It shows the consistency of this core idea.
This whole philosophy then gets written down, codified, after the failed Beer Hall Putsch while he's in prison, in Mein Kampf.
That's right. Dictated the first volume in Landsberg prison. Apparently, the original title was something incredibly unwieldy. 4.5 years of struggle against lies, stupidity, and cowardice.
Catchy.
Not quite. The publisher wisely changed it to Mein Kampf, My Struggle. Much more potent.
So, for a critical reader, how should we understand Mein Kampf? It's not just a book, is it?
No, not at all. It's crucial to see it as a deliberate, massive piece of propaganda. Some sources call it a fictional autobiography.
Meaning
Meaning it was designed to create the Adolf Hitler myth. It reframes his failures as noble trials, his adoption of ideology as some kind of revelation. It cements his unique authority as the unquestioned leader of the movement.
And ideologically.
It's a blueprint, plain and simple. It lays out the vision, a dictatorship based on race, the absolute need for Lebensraum, living space in the East, and it explicitly calls for the elimination of Jews. He uses dehumanizing language constantly.
Yeah.
Germs, international poisoners. It sets the stage intellectually for everything that followed.
So he writes this radical blueprint in prison. How does he get from there to actually becoming Chancellor of Germany? It seems like a huge leap.
It required a combination of things. Organizational skills, certainly that powerful rhetoric we talked about, and crucially, a catastrophic external event.
His political career really starts when he joins that small party, the German Workers' Party, DAP.
Yes, in 1919. Interestingly, he was encouraged to join, and initially to just monitor it by his army superiors. His superior, Karl Mayr, even allocated secret army funds for him, basically paid him to be a full-time propagandist.
And he found his niche immediately,
Yeah.
public speaking.
Oratory was his weapon. Biographers note he wasn't great at discussion, at give and take, but put him in front of a crowd. He could work them into this almost religious fervor, modulating his voice, dramatic pauses.
And he tapped into that national resentment, said what others were thinking, but didn't dare say.
Exactly. Tearing up the Versailles Treaty, blaming everything on the internal enemy, the Jews, the Marxists. It resonated. By 1921, he was drawing huge crowds, filling places like the Circus Krone in Munich, nearly 6,000 people. That gave him power within the party.
And he used that power.
Ruthlessly. When the party committee tried to merge with another group and potentially dilute his influence, he just resigned dramatically.
Forced their hand again.
Completely. He only agreed to come back if they gave him absolute power as party chairman. And they did. The vote in July 1921 was something like 533 to 1.
So the Führerprinzip, the leadership principle, was established inside the party years before he applied it to the state.
Yes, the party became the model. But that confidence led to a major misstep. The Beer Hall Putsch, November 1923.
The attempt to seize power in Bavaria by force, with General Ludendorff.
That's the one. It failed spectacularly. Quickly put down by the police, people were killed, 16 Nazis, 4 police officers. Hitler himself fled, was arrested later.
So prison again. But this time, it led to a change in strategy.
A fundamental pragmatic shift. Landsberg prison, where he wrote Mein Kampf, also seems to be where he realized that revolution from the outside wasn't going to work. When he got out in 1924, he made a critical decision. No more coups.
Use the system to destroy the system.
Essentially, yes. Use the parliamentary system, the democratic structures of the Weimar Republic, which he loathed to gain power legally. Choke democracy from the inside, as you said.
But that strategy didn't work immediately. The mid-1920s.
The golden 20s.
Yeah.
The Weimar Republic actually stabilized for a while. Economic recovery, relative political calm. The Nazis became fringe again, only got 2.6% of the vote in the 1928 election. Most Germans weren't interested in radicalism then.
Until the crash.
Until the crash.
Yeah.
The Wall Street crash of 1929, the Great Depression. That was the game changer. The external shock the Nazi movement needed. Germany's economy, heavily reliant on U.S. loans, just collapsed.
Unemployment skyrocketed.
Towards 6, maybe 7 million people. Widespread misery, desperation. And the moderate political parties seemed paralyzed, unable to cope.
And suddenly Hitler's message started to hit home.
It resonated powerfully, especially with those who felt they'd lost everything or about to small business owners, farmers, unemployed veterans. He promised jobs, national pride, economic recovery, and crucially, he promised to tear up Versailles and reparations, get back lost territory.
The political results were dramatic.
Astronomical. The Nazis went from that 2.6% in 1928 to becoming the largest party in the Reichstag by July 1932, with 37% of the vote.
But how did he get from being leader of the largest party to actually being chancellor? That wasn't automatic.
No, it involved intense political maneuvering. And a huge miscalculation by the traditional conservative elite. People like Franz von Papen, a former chancellor.
They thought they could control him.
They thought they could use his mass popularity for their own ends, form a right-wing government, keep him on a tight leash, use him to crush the left, and then discard him. They pressured the aging President Hindenburg.
And Hindenburg appointed Hitler chancellor on January 30th, 1933.
He did. The conservatives thought they were the puppet masters. They tragically underestimated the speed, the ruthlessness, and the sheer determination Hitler had to dismantle the entire state using the very legal power they just handed him.
So, Chancellor, January 30th, 1933. He moves incredibly fast then, doesn't he, to consolidate power?
Astonishingly fast. The first major opportunity came less than a month later. The Reichstag fire, February 27th.
The German parliament building burns down. Still debated who started it.
Exactly. But regardless of who lit the match, the Nazis seized the political opportunity instantly. The very next day, February 28th, Hindenburg was persuaded to sign the Reichstag fire decree.
Using Article 48, the emergency clause in the Weimar Constitution.
Precisely. And this decree effectively suspended basic civil liberties, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, privacy of communications. Gone.
Constitutional cover to crush opponents.
It allowed them to legally arrest thousands of political opponents, especially communists and social democrats. It created a climate of fear just before the next crucial step.
Which was the Enabling Act, March 1933.
This was the constitutional kill shot for the Weimar Republic. The Enabling Act basically allowed Hitler's cabinet to pass laws without any involvement from the Reichstag for 4 years. It merged legislative and executive power into his hands.
But didn't that need a 2/3 majority in the Reichstag? How did they get that?
Well, they'd already arrested all the communist deputies using the Reichstag fire decree. And on the day of the vote, the Kroll Opera House, where the Reichstag was meeting, was surrounded by intimidating SA and SS men. The remaining deputies, particularly from the Center Party, were pressured into voting yes.
So democracy legally dismantled itself, essentially?
In under 6 months, yes. With the Enabling Act passed, they moved swiftly to eliminate all other political parties. The Social Democrats were banned, trade unions dissolved, even their conservative coalition partner, the DMVP, were forced to dissolve. By July 1933, Germany was a one-party state.
And they started restructuring society, too, this idea of Volksgemeinschaft.
The people's community, yes. They dissolved the independent trade unions and forced workers into the German labor front, controlled by the Nazi Party. The idea, or the propaganda at least, was to eliminate class conflict. No more workers versus bosses. Just one unified nation, one folk, under Nazi leadership.
But there was still an internal threat, wasn't there? Within the Nazi movement itself, the SA.
The Sturmabteilung, the brown shirts.
Yeah.
Yes. Led by Ernst Röhm, one of Hitler's oldest allies. The SA had millions of members, the street fighters who brought the Nazis to power. Röhm and some SA leaders started talking about a second revolution.
What did that mean?
They wanted the SA to absorb or replace the regular German army, the Reichswehr. They wanted a more radical, ongoing social revolution. This terrified the traditional army generals and also the big industrialists who backed Hitler. They saw Röhm as a dangerous radical.
Which led to the Night of the Long Knives, June 1934.
A brutal, calculated purge. Hitler used the SS and the army to murder Röhm and dozens, maybe hundreds of other SA leaders, along with other political rivals like Gregor Strasser and even some conservatives who'd crossed him.
Why was this move so critical?
It achieved two things. One, it eliminated any internal challenge to Hitler's absolute authority within the party. Two, and perhaps more importantly, it secured the unwavering loyalty of the German army. The generals were immensely grateful for the removal of the SA threat. Hitler had chosen the established military over his own paramilitary force.
The final piece fell into place soon after.
When President Hindenburg died in August 1934, Hitler didn't appoint a new president. He simply merged the offices of Chancellor and President.
Creating the new title, Führer und Reichskanzler, leader and chancellor.
Absolute power, concentrated in one man. He then had the entire armed forces and all civil servants swear a new oath not to the Constitution, but a personal loyalty directly to him, Adolf Hitler. The state was now completely subordinate to the leader.
With total control established, the core ideology could be fully implemented. The Nuremberg Laws of 1935.
The legislative embodiment of the racial doctrine. These laws stripped Jews of German citizenship. They forbade marriage, even sexual relations, between Jews and people defined as having German or related blood. It wasn't just prejudice, it was state-enforced biological segregation, defining identity solely by blood.
And foreign policy became completely focused on aggression.
Entirely driven by that core idea of Lebensraum, living space. He needed land in Eastern Europe for German settlement and the resources that came with it. This meant violating the Treaty of Versailles openly. Rapid rearmament began immediately.
Then came the territorial moves. Anschluss with Austria in 1938.
Unification with Austria, yes. Then the demand for the Sudetenland, the German-speaking region of Czechoslovakia.
Which led to the Munich Agreement, often seen as appeasement, giving Hitler what he wanted.
Yes, Britain and France gave him the Sudetenland to avoid war. But here's a key insight for understanding his mindset. Hitler was reportedly furious about the Munich Agreement.
Furious. He got what he demanded.
But he didn't get the war he wanted then and there. He saw it as a diplomatic defeat because it denied him the immediate military conflict he craved. It shows that the ideology wasn't just about reclaiming territory. It required violent conflict and conquest.
And that drive for conflict inevitably led to September 1st, 1939, the invasion of Poland.
Which finally triggered declarations of war from Britain and France. Our sources suggest many around him, generals, even key Nazis, were hesitant about plunging into a wider war just yet. But Hitler's belief in his own destiny, his intuition, was absolute by this point.
And the quick victory in Poland.
And then the stunningly fast defeat of France in 1940. They tragically reinforced his conviction. He started genuinely believing he was a military genius, superior to his professional generals.
Which led to him taking more direct control of strategy.
Increasingly so, and often disastrously. But the ultimate ideological target was always the East, Lebensraum, and the destruction of what he called Judeo-Bolshevism.
So invading the Soviet Union in June 1941, Operation Barbarossa, despite the non-aggression pact they'd signed.
Yes, breaking the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. This was the ultimate ideological war, a war of annihilation against communism, against Slavs who were deemed subhuman, and against the perceived heartland of the Jewish conspiracy he believed controlled it all.
But his military genius started to show cracks pretty quickly on the Eastern Front.
Big time. A key example.
Yeah.
Late 1941. The German advance stalls just outside Moscow. Instead of pushing for the capital, Hitler diverts crucial panzer divisions southward, towards the Caucasus, for oil economic reasons.
Strategic blunder.
Many historians see it as critical. He gave the Red Army breathing room, time to mobilize its vast reserves. The chance for a quick knockout blow was lost.
And his response to setbacks was more control.
Exactly. Micromanagement escalated. By December 1941, he'd sacked the Army's commander-in-chief and appointed himself head of the Army High Command, the OKH. From then on, strategy became increasingly rigid, dictated by his ego and ideology, not military reality.
Stalingrad being the prime example, late 1942.
The absolute refusal to allow the Sixth Army to break out or retreat when they were encircled. Purely ideological reasons, no surrender, hold every inch. It led to the complete destruction of an entire army. A catastrophic defeat the Wehrmacht arguably never recovered from on the Eastern Front. Dogma trumped reality, trumped human life.
And while this military disaster unfolds, the other core part of the ideology, racial annihilation, is being implemented systematically.
On an industrial scale. The Wannsee Conference in January 1942 wasn't where the decision was made that came earlier, but it was where the bureaucracy coordinated the final solution.
The plan to murder Europe's entire Jewish population, around 11 million people targeted.
That's along with millions of Slavs, Roma, political opponents, homosexuals, disabled people, anyone deemed Untermenschen, subhuman, or an enemy of the Reich, under plans like General Plan Ulst for the East.
It's often noted Hitler kept a distance from the actual killing process.
He did. He never spoke publicly in detail about the killings, never visited a concentration camp. He received reports, he gave the orders, absolutely. But he maintained a physical and rhetorical distance.
Why? To maintain the myth.
It seems likely. Keep the Führer figure elevated, pure, untainted by the mechanics of mass murder. That was delegated, bureaucratized, handled by Himmler, Heydrich, the SS. It allowed him, perhaps, to maintain the psychological fiction that he was just fulfilling some grand, inevitable historical destiny. Like he'd prophesied in that Reichstag speech back in 1939, war means the annihilation of the Jews.
His own health started failing significantly in the later war years, too.
Dramatically. There's clear evidence from biographers and medical records. Signs of Parkinson's disease, tremors, chronic stomach problems, and a heavy reliance on drugs.
Dr. Morell's concoctions.
His personal physician, Theodore Morell, was administering this cocktail. Up to 28 different substances, apparently. Amphetamines, barbiturates, opiates, hormones.
That must have affected his judgment.
Undoubtedly, making him more erratic, manic, paranoid, probably worsening the inflexible decision-making, the detachment from reality, and surviving the July 20th bomb plot in 1944.
He took that as proof of divine protection.
It seems so. Reinforced his belief in his own destiny, his intuition, and deepened his distrust of his generals even further.
Until the very end. April 1945, the Führer bunker in Berlin. The Red Army closing in.
The final days. Defined by denial, rage, betrayal. He finally had to admit, apparently, everything is lost. But he wasn't blaming himself.
He blamed his generals, the German people.
Yes. Raged against them for failing him, for not being strong enough, for being unworthy of his great vision. Utter refusal to take responsibility.
His final acts were symbolic. Marrying Eva Braun.
His long-term mistress, yes. Married her just hours before the end, April 29th, 1945, then dictated his last will and political testament.
And even then, the ideology remained absolute.
Unchanged. He urged his successors to relentlessly continue the fight against international Jewry, to maintain racial purity laws. He explicitly justified the mass murder policies, calling the elimination of Jews one of his greatest services.
And then suicide, April 30th.
Eva Braun took cyanide. Hitler used both cyanide and a gunshot to the head, ensuring death.
And the order to burn the bodies.
Doused with petrol in the Chancellery Garden and set alight. To prevent capture, humiliation, display like what happened to Mussolini. A final attempt to control his own narrative, his own end. Witnesses at the time, people who lived through it, described his death almost like a spell breaking. That the whole edifice of Nazism, so dependent on this one figure embodying the ideology, just seemed to burst like a bubble. Hashtag outro, synthesis and final thought.
So we've traced this path. From those early personal failures, the wounded ego, adopting this all-consuming Weltanschauung that gave him an enemy, then using his undeniable rhetorical skill, exploiting the collapse of Weimar democracy, legally grabbing power, and finally becoming this absolute dictator, relentlessly pursuing Lebensraum and racial annihilation.
And I think for you, listening as a history or philosophy student, the deep dive really underscores that profound danger. The danger of a charismatic leader who successfully weaponizes a totalizing ideology, how it can replace nuanced thought with rigid dogma, channel national anger into something utterly destructive and expansionist.
And that final point you mentioned, from his last will, blaming the German people, insisting on continuing the annihilation, it leaves us with a really stark thought, doesn't it?
It does. Consider this. His commitment to the ideology was so absolute that he preferred the utter destruction of his own nation to any form of compromise. He blamed the Germans for being too weak to fulfill his vision.
What does that tell us philosophically when a leader values the doctrine above the nation itself?
It suggests perhaps that for him, the German nation the Volk he claimed to champion was never the ultimate goal. It was merely a tool. An expendable instrument for realizing the ideology. The doctrine itself was the only thing that truly mattered.
A chilling thought indeed. A reminder of where absolute dogma can lead. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.